just start talking about something.
Yeah. We've been pre-talking for about an hour, and here we
We
go.
have. This is ridiculous. We could have recorded an episode by now. And like every 2 minutes, I was like, this would be such an amazing episode. Why are we not recording this? What Kyle is saying needs saved for posterity.
Yeah. Well, okay, so there's an astrologer that I like. I don't agree with him on everything, right? But what I enjoy about him on many levels is that it takes me, like, listening to him or watching his videos, like, takes me back to when I was first into astrology, where I'm like looking for the answer to something about me or in general, because he is a tropical Vedic astrologer, Cara. You can find him on YouTube.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. And it makes sense. I mean, it's like he has good arguments for it, and he just uses the Vedic techniques with tropical zodiac, and it is really, really interesting. And it starts to make more sense in like how it overlaps with Western astrology, because it came from Western astrology. Like they got it from the Greeks. When the Greeks conquered, they made their way into India, Alexander the Great, and that's how astrology got to them, and they did it. It kind of evolved into its own branch, but it suddenly becomes extremely useful, and I've been integrating Vedic techniques into my approach. But some of the ways, I don't take all of it, but some of the things that get introduced through Vedic astrology for me make just sense. There's stuff that like made me question, stuff that I questioned earlier on, that I just sort of took for granted after a while, because you get beat over the head with stuff long enough, and you're just like, okay, all right. But he was talking about Venus through like all the houses, right? And he was citing, he like translates Vedic sources.
Oh, nice!
It's like his thing. He's a punk rock musician as well in his previous life, his pre-astrology life.
Well, I have to approve now.
Yeah. You would probably dig him. He's kind of a jerk too, which I sort of enjoy. He's like, you can tell he's annoyed that he gets like annoyed with people's questions all the time. I think he thinks everybody's stupid for not listening to his stuff more. I don't know, but which I appreciate on a certain level. But anyway, he was talking about Venus in the 8th and 12th houses, and why in Vedic astrology it's actually they're good placements for Venus. It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
When you think about it, when is Venus the most visible? Venus it's always either a morning star or an evening star. So when the sun's rising, if you want to see Venus, it better be in the 12th house, probably, for you to actually be able to see it. Otherwise, it's going to be under the beams. It might have this narrow window of being in the first where it's visible, but the 12th and 8th would be where Venus is most likely to be seen.
Mm-hmm. So does that only apply when the sun is rising and setting, or is it all the time?
The idea is that it's all the time. That Venus and Mercury, to a lesser degree, I guess, from the Vedic perspective, have a special power in those houses, because they're houses that naturally they're places in the sky where they naturally have more juice, which is interesting to think about.
It's like they're able to break away from the sun a bit.
Oh, I think. Yeah. That's, I think, maybe, I can't tell if you're talking because you're freezing up on me a little, but some connectivity issues. That's kind of how I like to think about it too, is that, like, I don't know, when I think about Venus and the kind of Venus I like, and granted I have Venus in the 12th house, so I don't know, maybe I want to justify it, but it's not a placement that really bugs me. I don't find my Venus in the 12th house really showing up as super difficult. It has some like mitigations, I guess, but it doesn't seem especially 12th housey to me. I think I have more Mars problems, I guess, in the 8th, which makes more sense. But you think about Venus and like to get away from the sun, kind of to be sort of separate from like that loud, bright, like look at me, sun energy. Seems like what Venus is kind of about a little bit, like taking you away from your ego, taking you away from being super self-involved and caring about other people, right? Which 12th house uh, is sort of the stuff that you kind of give away or that falls away from you. I find it shows up a lot as like people doing work to like undo their bullshit, their sort of psychology. So I think why psychology tends to show up there a lot, because it's like your mental health, and so much of mental health is undoing patterns that you've been carrying around your whole life.
That is so true.
So I mean, I think it conceptually makes sense that it seems to work okay. And I've seen a lot of celebrities with Venus in the 12th house as well. Actually, a lot of celebrities with 12th house
I think
planets
that
in
really
general.
makes sense. Like, I mean, one of the things about the 12th house, like going back to the way things appear in the sky, that's really the place where planets are first visible. But it's like they're visible in the way that, like, you know, a newborn is visible. Like if there's a newborn around, like everybody knows it. But like they're super unself-conscious. And like, you know, one of the things, of course, you probably know this, but you know, people say that planets in the 12th house are things that are visible to everybody else, but they're not visible to you. And I think that the reason why there are so many celebrities with Venus in the 12th is because there's this coolness factor. There's this star quality to people who are beautiful and glamorous and just generally Venusian and aren't hung up on it, who don't really know or understand how other people see them. And like you can see that with a lot of celebrities, like, you know, even when they're on the red carpet, it's just like, this is so freaking ridiculous. I don't know why you're staring at me right now, but this is my job, so I'm gonna wave at you.
Yeah. And it becomes almost more like you're doing it for the celebrity, maybe is doing it for them, doing it for the audience more than they're doing it for themselves in some ways. Or like they're like, this is what you do, and you know, it's not necessarily about how I'm feeling right now or how I feel about myself. This is what the people want, I guess. It's making me think about Tom Hanks's birth chart. Which, God, I hope nobody ever says anything about Tom Hanks. Like, find out something horrible about Tom Hanks, because my partner and I like have this sort of like just love for Tom Hanks. There's like something about Tom Hanks that just makes me like, I don't know. It just feels like he would be the best dad ever. Which I don't know if he was a great dad or not. His kids seem to like him still. You know, one of them's an actor. I know I mean, he had a bad first marriage, or he kind of left his first family, I think, hanging. But I don't know all the details. But it's hard not to like Tom Hanks, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm looking through his astro.com profile, and usually they're pretty good about putting controversies up there because like it's relevant for reading his or reading anybody's chart. But I'm not seeing anything here. He got COVID in March of 2020, which I didn't know about.
Yeah, I remember there was an article that said Tom Hanks's blood was going to save the world. Which I loved that idea. Yeah, because he's like one of the first celebrities to get COVID. I think him and his wife. And everybody's like kind of worried about him, and he was like doing what Tom Hanks does, which is like make people like feel comfortable. I don't know about it. He's like, we're doing okay, and like not making a big deal about it, and like but like giving the people what they want, like answering questions about it, and like keeping people updated.
Oh wow.
And like managing, you know, his health. But he has the moon in Leo in the 12th house, which is not Venus. He has an interesting thing going on with Venus, but it's not really what we're talking about.
Yeah. Conjunct the midheaven in Gemini. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's retrograde, and it looks like it's about to get hit with a square from Mars. Mars is in the superior square in Pisces. But I I started making a GIF out of it, but I didn't finish it because it was taking too long. But Venus actually applies retrograde towards Mars, and then at about a degree, stations direct and goes forward, and like the square never perfects. And it's interesting because go ahead.
That's a perfect description of like the actor who played Forrest Gump.
yeah, I know he's like these near misses all the time, and it's just sort of like dumb luck, kind of finding his way through. Yeah, he was actually like a really socially awkward kid, apparently, and like really shy. And then at some point, he realized that just sort of moving into that, people would like laugh, and so he just sort of rolled with it. And it seems to sort of fit. It's like, and actually, it sort of timed up pretty well with the progression, with Venus stationing direct by progression. Like, oh, okay, I'm making weirdness work for me. And then it, worked for him.
You were mentioning your progressed Venus stationing retrograde, I think, a few minutes ago.
Oh, yeah, actually, I have the same.
When did that happen?
He has Venus on the same. We have Venus synastry. I have the same degree Venus as.
Oh my goodness!
It's Tom Hanks. Wow, I feel special now. No, yeah. Well, hold on. I want to say the thing about his moon, right? He's got the moon in Leo in the 12th. Real quick, because there was a point about it. Is the moon rules his 11th house, which is a house that has to do with fans, right? Mm-hmm. Often you'll see fans showing up in the 11th house, and the ruler of his first is in the 11th. He's a Virgo rising. He has Mercury in the 11th. It's also like just outside the beams of the sun, so it's more visible Mercury. But the moon ruling it, you would think that would like kind of drag it down, right? Or make, have fallout with fans or something, fans turning on him, or maybe not liking being around people, trying to be alone. But I think how it ends up showing up for him is he'll have that quality of just sort of being available for the audience and fans and stuff. And I'm sure he likes it to some degree, but it's like not, I don't know, he's like kind of like a chill celebrity. And like there's a humility maybe to like the way he talks about himself or views himself. Like he won't like dig into his celebrity very much. He was on a guest on this podcast that is one of my favorite podcasts of all time, Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. I highly recommend it. And he showed up on the show, and Dan Carlin, who it's like he was the son of two actors, but he's like been in radio, and then he's kind of a podcasting celebrity to some degree, but very minor maybe celebrity. And he was like expressing his like sense of like awe that Tom Hanks was on his show, and Tom Hanks was like, dude, like you're a celebrity in my house, like we talk about you all the time, we listen to your podcast. And he just had this very like humble, like nice way of like making, I could like hear Dan Carlin becoming more comfortable. I don't know. It was just like this really like, I don't know, warm sort of fatherly vibe that he has that like actually makes the fans like him more. I don't know. So the 12th house can be kind of like that, I guess was my point.
I love the 12th house. Like I understand why it's difficult for people, for sure. Mm-hmm. Like I have a couple of articles on my website that are related to the 12th house that drive by most of my traffic. I mean the vast majority of my traffic, like 99% of my traffic. And like I get people emailing me once a week, like, crying because I understood their 12th house. And like, yeah, there's definitely like difficulty there, but also at the same time, like I feel like, and this is just my envy as someone with Leo rising, but the unself-conscious quality of 12th house planets just like completely endears me to people, because like I feel like I am this neurotic mess all the time, just like completely conscious of everything that is going on around me at all times, and especially what I'm doing and how it might be affecting other people. And like those 12th house planets just like they do their thing and they don't really think about it, and it seems to work out anyway, as long as they're not like, a drunk mess. like
Yeah.
like you can definitely do the 12th house badly, but like it's like if you are wondering if you're doing the 12th house badly, you're doing just fine. Because if you're
Yeah.
doing the 12th house badly, like you're in the hospital or you're in prison. Like it's not a subtle thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's actually like one of the houses that it's probably hardest for me still to get a decent idea beforehand if it's working okay or not. It's kind of unpredictable like that.
Mhm.
I find 12th house planets seem to like work okay. Sometimes you get like that sort of like chill, not overthinky component to the person, or like not overly self-involved component. Um,
Mhm.
but then you get like them showing up as like somebody being really not connected to reality, like a little just too off in Never Land. Which can totally be the 12th house, and it can be a nice part of the 12th house. But yeah, I
Especially
don't know.
lately.
I'm skeptical. Yeah, I know. Seriously, I'm. I don't know. I think it's like an important quality that I look for maybe in astrologers is like I like when I see that they have a reserve of um, skepticism about stuff. Like they don't just like, well, that's 12th house, that's bad because it says
Mhm.
so. Dorothea said so, and so did Ptolemy. I don't know. It's like, yes, listen to them. Their books have survived and they are really important and useful. But like, just keeping that little bit of skepticism to be open to alternatives or open to
Yeah.
nuance, I think is important.
I mean, I came from a religious tradition that was absolutely dogmatic about every word that was written in a 2,000-year-old book being absolutely correct.
I
And
know,
like,
seriously.
and I see people who got out and then start doing the exact same thing with like Maternus, and I'm like,
Hmm.
no, no, no. Like, you won't wear the same jeans that you were wearing 5 years ago. Why are you not
Yeah.
acknowledging that things can change about human nature? Like, don't you know that Freud happened? Like, that was a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know. I think that there is something to maybe just like the need that certain people have to, even if it's terrible, it's like conspiracy theories, like why people buy into them because it um gives people the sense that somebody's in control or something is in control
Mhm,
of what's
mhm.
going on. It's not just all happening randomly. Even if it's bad, for a lot of people, it's more comforting to know that there's like a plan or or somebody's at the steering wheel than just chaos, right?
Yeah.
But I guess I have to admit to myself that I'm also of the. It's almost like no matter what the doctrine or dogma is, I'm always gonna. For me to feel comfortable, I need to be able to challenge it or question it. I need it to not be 100% foolproof and true for me to feel like there's some wiggle room.
It's almost like you have planets in Aquarius there.
Oh God, I know.
No, my Aquarius moon sees you and understands you and says
Yeah,
absolutely right.
yeah, yeah.
But no, like
I
I don't wanna sound like I'm completely coming down on tradition. Like,
Mhm.
I am always the person who's like, "Do not tear down a fence until you understand why somebody put it up." But
Yeah. Oh
at the
yeah.
same time, don't worship the fence until you understand why somebody put it up either.
Yeah. And I'm kind of just like, don't worship the fence still, but like, respect the fence, admire the fence, appreciate the fence's beauty and its use and its role, but always be willing to tear it down if it stops being
Eh,
useful at some point,
and
or
I was about to be like,
be
but
open to
I've
the
seen
possibility of
some
something
really
else.
beautiful Victorian wrought iron fences. And then I was like, yeah, and how many people worship the Victorian period? Like, that's just such a perfect example.
Yeah. I know you can get stuck in it. So, like,
But as
anyway,
astrologers, we
where were you
can't
start with
worship the
this?
Victorian period because they didn't do astrology
Yeah,
because that was during the Dark Age. So we have to
yeah.
be anti-Victorian partisans at least a little bit.
The Victorian age was really what kind of was the dark age of astrology in a lot of ways.
It was, which is
It is
sad
where
to me because like it's the height of spiritualism and romanticism. Like I feel like it should have been a great time for astrology, but then like I remember that, you know, Keats and Shelley were both atheists, and that just like completely blows my mind.
it. I know it does too, but I guess I think about it a lot of the way that I think about how astrology showed up in my life, like where I'm like this, always been this, person who was very interested in philosophy and spirituality and stuff, but could never really believe solidly in any of it because you know, I'm a
Mhm.
material, like I believe it when I see it kind of person.
Mhm.
Just trying to balance like that, scientific skeptical mindset with that sort of, um, for lack of a better word, like that spiritual, romantic, idealistic part. And astrology, it was like was always there, sort of in the background, like, and I was like, oh, I'm interested in that. Oh, but it's astrology, or it was like I was kind of dancing around it, and it was like almost like wasn't until I was ready for it that it like revealed itself to me for what it is. And then I was like, where have
Mm.
you been all my life, astrology? And I almost feel like that's like kind of how it ended up working. Maybe like you have the Victorian era where it was like the rise and height of science and stuff. Not height
Mhm.
of science, but like science was rising, right?
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
Becoming more important. Um, but you also had it sort of evolving out of that, in response to it, that heightening of like the romanticism and like the wanting to hold on to the romanticism or the
Mhm.
magical thinking or the magical spiritual stuff. But it was like
Mhm.
astrology had been too like, I don't know, it had been sort of, I don't know, astrology maybe was too important at a certain point. Astrology also
Mm,
scared
mhm.
the bejesus out of people, I think, a lot. Uh, it's still, I mean, it can. I think it's why certain like astrologers are not as popular, uh, because they scare people. They talk about real life too much. I don't know.
Mm, mhm.
Um, but like
So how
the Catholic
did you
Church
get
never
into
really designed this. One second. The Catholic Church just never really said that astrology wasn't real. It was like
Wait,
they
what?
no, back in like the Middle Ages, they like weren't saying that
Oh,
astrology
yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
real. They just didn't like they had like it scared the shit out of them. They thought it was from the devil. It was like this is too no, you're meddling with things that you shouldn't, and this is freaky. Stop it. Anyway, what were you
So
about to
did
say?
they, like, never say that astrology is bad? Because, like, obviously, if it was being taught in universities in Europe, like,
Mhm.
the Catholic Church couldn't have been that much against astrology. But, like, I assumed at some point, one of the popes was like, "Okay, we're done with this. Everybody move on."
I think it
But
was. I
no?
mean, I'm not an expert on the history of astrology. I know a bit,
Neither
but
am I.
I know that it was like a lot of things. Like the church would tolerate for periods of time, um, and then sort of like when it became an inconvenience for them in some way, they felt like it was getting too popular or it was drawing away from the power of the church, then they would put the kibosh on it and start saying it was from the devil or something.
So it was more of, like, a push-pull.
Yeah, I mean they were like that with
Yeah,
a
that
lot of
makes sense.
things. Like they would tolerate prostitution, if it was not interfering with their agenda, but then you know they might crack down on it for a while.
Yeah, speaking of the Victorians, that was, like, the golden age of prostitution.
Was it really?
Oh, yeah. Like, the British Army had, like, had women on the payroll, and like it's super freaking Victorian. Like
I
these
haven't.
women were like ranked, and like the prettiest women were given to like the highest officers, and then there was like, first grade, second grade, like until you got down to the people who were sleeping with like, the not the drummer boys, because that would be totally inappropriate, but like, the guy who's cleaning the latrine or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. That does sound very British, actually.
Right.
Where like you have it very hierarchical, right? But it's also like there's a practicality to it where it's like we want to keep discipline.
Mhm.
If we don't do this, then they're gonna go off and get, you know, they're gonna break rank and unfortunately, like rape everybody in town when they conquer a place, uh, or go to a bar and maybe not show back up, go to a brothel and show up a week later, tanked or something still, and then they would have to execute them, and that's no fun.
You are so good at thinking like a Victorian, like, this is so terrifying to me.
I mean,
So, what I was asking you is, how did you get into astrology in the first place? Like, I don't even think we've
hmm.
had this conversation yet.
Well, so basically, it was around. Well, first got into astrology. I remember looking at it was at a Chinese restaurant when I was a kid, and seeing the Chinese zodiac, or like the
Mhm,
Chinese
me
year.
too.
I found out it was the year of the dragon, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Dragons are cool. I like dragons.
Oh, I'm
Um,
so jealous.
and I was just found it intriguing. Like, oh, this is like a way of describing people or identifying people or categorizing people that was interesting to me, like kind of fun. And it was like kind of in the back of my mind, I guess, or something. Like I would run into horoscope columns. I like would get the newspaper, right, or it would just be around when I was a kid, and I would go to the comics because I wanted to see what the comics were, if they
Yeah.
existed. I don't think you even see that anymore, but and I would look at the horoscope column. I would read the little thing and see like, oh, how does that relate to me? Um, I have all these like little memories around astrology. But then I remember like I I always gravitated towards that kind of thing. Like I not even
Hmm.
like the part about it I think that always drew me was the people-y part, the like figuring people out part. So I remember getting into graphology at one point and like interpreting handwriting, and it was like a trick I would do for people in school. Be like, oh yeah, I can look at your handwriting and I can tell you things about yourself. And uh, I would do it, and they'd be like, "Whoa, oh, that's cool." Like, yeah, it's cool. And I think it was, and then I got into like psychology and anthropology and like all the other people sciences. And it's like it's just wanting to understand people, I guess, like wanting to figure them out. But I think what really ended up sucking me in uh, was, God, what year was it? 2016, 2017? Not that long ago, really. Like when I think about it now, but like once the spark hit, it was like just took over like everything. I started just like obsessively studying it, but it was my dad's wife, um, right around when he died. She asked everybody what if we knew our ascendant and moon signs, and I was like, no, what's that? And so she like read everybody's for us all. And it's like going around and just like everybody was like having theirs read, and like there's just like fun, like, oh wow, that's neat. And then she read mine, and I got really uncomfortable.
Well, you have a Scorpio moon, so of course you did.
Yeah.
What's your job?
Well, and it felt like I'd been kind of outed or something. Like, and in retrospect, it's like, okay, everybody knows that I'm like kind of moody and secretive and stuff, right? But like, I just felt like, oh, not like you're what? How did you know? Like, I don't know. How does this thing know that? Like, I didn't think it would be like that real, I guess, because I'd like read my sun sign, Taurus sun. I was like, yeah, okay, a little bit, um, and then with the rising sign, which I didn't realize that the moon also rules Cancer for a while, but It's like, okay. As I got deeper into it, it's like, that's why it makes sense. But like for the first like couple months, I was trying to figure out if it was possible that it was wrong, because I didn't want it to be true. Didn't want the truth to be true. It's like, but not really though. I could be a Sag moon, maybe I'm one of those. That sounds better. Because I was like in this mindset of like, because I'd done like a lot of work, like I'd been in therapy and stuff. Like, it was kind of problematic for a little bit because I felt like it was making me regress. Because it was like stuff that I'd worked really hard on to like sort of overcome or to manage better, but then like it was like saying to me like, this is you can't be anything different, you know. That's what I heard from it at first. And it freaked me out, and I wanted to disprove it. I wanted to like prove that astrology wasn't real to myself. And the deeper I got, but like I also was fascinated by it. Like I can't explain how there's like these two different parts existing at the same time, like where I'm fascinated by it, and I want to like know more and like use it, but then I'm like, no, it's not really true. That's basically how I got into it. How did you get into it?
That's hilarious. Like almost in the way that you got into it, I can see this like Scorpio moon, like dark fascination while also wanting to destroy. Like
I wanted to,
it's just amazing.
And get deeper and deeper and obsessive with it.
Yeah. That is hilarious. So I also had my first exposure to astrology from a Chinese menu thing on the table.
Nice.
I am not Year of the Dragon. I'm very jealous that you got a cool animal.
I know, it's the best one.
I am Year of the Ox. And immediately, of course, my little brother was like, ha, you're a cow, ha, you're a cow. And I looked at it, I was like, well, what's yours? And I was like, oh, you're a rat.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I didn't, I liked the idea of my brother being a rat. I didn't like the idea of being a cow so much. And then I later must have run into like a newspaper horoscope or something, and I found out that I was a Taurus. I was like, ox, bull, like I can't get away from this. Like if I had to pick one animal that I did not want, it would be a cow, and I am a cow. Like this, you know, no 11-year-old girl wants to hear that she's a cow.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't like astrology. Like I was like, maybe there's something there, but it was like maybe there's something there in the maybe I do suck as much as I think I do kind of teenage thing.
Yeah.
And then my next exposure to it was I got this book, Born on a Rotten Day. I was working at Hot Topic at the time, and it was so freaking slow that day that finally we had one book in the store, and it was Born on a Rotten Day. And I picked it up and started reading it to my coworkers just to entertain everybody. And that book made me so freaking mad. Like so mad, because I read the Taurus section and it was like, you're lazy. You spend the entire day on the couch eating ice cream. You don't own any clothes for moo. And I was like, I was old enough at this point. I was like 18 to understand reverse psychology. And, and there was this initial flare up, because I'm like a super fiery person. And I was like, this is not me. This is unacceptable, blah, 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 blah. And then there was like a little voice in my head that was like, are you just getting upset about that because it's true and you don't want it to be true? So I like sat with it. And I was like, no, this really isn't true. Like, I am not a lazy person. Like, I was the kid who wasn't happy with their SAT score. So I decided to get a copy of the LSAT study guide because I was convinced I was going to go to law school. I was a senior in high school walking around with an LSAT guide instead of like my actual textbooks. Like, of course, now I know that that's like a perfect expression of an Aquarius moon. Living years in the future.
Yeah.
But at the time, all I had was that Taurus laziness. And I was like, I hear this from people all the freaking time. And it's not true. And now here it's printed in a book. And like, this is like the most harmful thing in the world to me. And so I wandered off became super secular materialistic after growing up in a super fundamentalist Christian church. And I went to grad school and happened to have a professor who, Rachel Pollack, who is really big in the sci-fi scene and is also really big in the tarot scene.
Mm.
And she taught writing workshops that incorporated tarot. And I got hooked on the fact that I didn't need to believe anything to work with tarot in a storytelling context. So I got
Mhm.
my first tarot cards, and then like it just so happened at the woo woo store that I was now comfortable with because it meant that I could buy tarot cards there. They just happened to have a copy of The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest right next to the tarot cards. And it was one of those like staff recommends things. And they were like, if astrology hasn't been working for you and you're still curious, read this book. And I was like, okay, so maybe this book will tell me why astrology is wrong. And I ended up picking it up. And of course I did what everybody does. Like I flipped to my sun sign first to see what he had to say about that.
Oh yeah.
And like, I was in the middle of this like super woo woo store in Portland playing this like very gentle, like Indian music that was supposed to be like so soothing, and everybody's walking around like they have every planet in Pisces. And I'm just sitting there like bawling my eyes out because I have never felt more seen in my entire life. And
Yeah.
so the first 7 years after I discovered evolutionary astrology, I was like, there is no other astrology but the astrology of Stephen Forrest.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Every time I picked up a book after that, like I would flip to the cookbook section and they would be back on this train about how Taurus is lazy. And like I have since realized that the problem really is cookbooks. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because I have a T square with my big three, and so I'm never going to be like a stereotypical Taurus or a stereotypical Leo rising or stereotypical Aquarius moon. But um, there is just something about cookbooks, you know, even Stevens, like I can only read them and be like, okay, there's going to be maybe a sentence in here that's going to speak to me.
Yeah.
The rest of them just don't don't work.
Yeah. And I think that there's so much to that, and it's funny because it sounds like your path to astrology was very similar. Or was like
Yeah.
a fascination with a skepticism, but
Mhm.
like what do I do with this? Um, and for me, I feel like I got into it for a lot of the same reasons too at the same time, because there's like two. I don't know. There's multiple forces driving it. I know for me, and I've had time to like
Mm.
retrospect on it. Um, but I think like well, for a lot of people want to be seen. I think it was a good point. I think I have a
Mhm.
complicated relationship with it. I feel like Scorpio moons don't want to be seen. Like you won't see me. That's not who I am. They want to look like Taurus moons. They want to present nicely. Um, at the same time, I
Whereas
also wanted to be told that everything was going to be okay. I wanted to
oh,
hear that, and it almost like forced me deeper because I kept running into really negative interpretations of everything, uh,
oh
and I was very
no.
sensitive to them. And it was like I kept like looking for it and just running into to worse stuff. It's like the deeper I got, the more
Yeah,
doomed I felt, and
yeah.
I had to kind of reach the bottom of that to like like realize what I was doing, uh, to like kind of come back to myself. I don't know. It was like I had given everything away to astrology. Like once I started to believe in it, I started to look for it to do more than what I don't want to say no, but what I now believe is actually capable of doing. I don't think astrology is does or is meant to describe everything about you and your life and everything.
Mhm.
Um, what it should be is is a tool, to help you understand yourself and help you bounce, uh, when you can see yourself and actually look at yourself for like who you really are and see like both the good and the bad in that and the value and the drawbacks of that, like you can make more deliberate positive decisions around that.
Yeah.
But it was like I just wanted astrology to tell me I'm good and that everything's good and I will be good and that everything will work out for me and I'm going to be famous and rich and have a happy, wonderful life. And I think that is what a lot of people go into astrology looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of maybe what fuels some of like the worst parts of astrology is that you get stuff that just says everything's great, and then you get a lot of shit talking astrology, which I think
Oh yeah.
is useful for people in when they want to justify a decision about someone else, like or justify why they don't like someone else, or
Mm-hmm.
use it to justify their decisions because like, oh well, they're a Gemini. Geminis, you can't ever trust them. They're gonna
Mm-hmm.
manipulate you, or they'll cheat on you, or you becomes like a way for you to do what you already do, but just in a different way. Which I guess,
Yeah.
and if I'm honest, I end up doing that with astrology too. Where so I mean, I guess we can't help it. I guess we're gonna do with astrology what we tend to do with things already.
Yeah. I mean, you don't stop being yourself just because you have a birth chart in your hand.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if you're a thoughtful person who takes things in critically and is critical of your own thoughts and that sort of thing, like you'll pick up a birth chart and you'll still be a thoughtful person who is critical of things and their own thoughts. And if you're a person who is looking for reasons to be angry all the time, a birth chart would be happy to help you with that.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and you might be both of those things, or yeah, I don't like. For me,
Oh yeah.
it it actually ended up making me aware of something about myself, and it had nothing to do with astrology necessarily. Though I can see where it shows up in my chart now, but uh, is like I do have like a critical rational side where I can get back to reality and like be very discerning, but I can be totally willing, or I'm very capable of being convinced of things about myself that aren't necessarily true. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and I don't know, and it was like I was looking to astrology to tell me who I am, and it was taking me away from what I already knew about myself. I don't know. So I guess I don't know. I have a lot of opinions about it because I've been on both sides of it with astrology, and I feel like I have a
Mhm.
good idea of like what it's useful for, what it's good for, and what it's bad for, and
Yeah.
maybe the wrong way to use it. Um, and I think that's one of them is that like when you give your personality and your identity and your free will and your agency away to astrology, it'll take it, I think, from you. If you're the kind of person who will do that, it will take it, if that makes sense. I don't know. It's like you.
It will, but I feel like we're seeing the differences between our backgrounds here because,
Mhm.
um, my first real exposure to astrology, I don't count Born on a Rotten Day, like, that's not a real astrology book, um, but my
I'd say it's
first exposure to
there's a book like that, a birthday
well,
book that I really liked that I was just drawn to for some reason before I got into astrology. There's a bunch of stuff like that that pops into my head, which I guess I see as part of the journey, but go ahead.
well, I'm trying to be fair, like, I'm trying to be fair to, like, other branches of astrology and not like, I read Born on a Rotten Day, therefore my first exposure was to traditional astrology. Like that's not fair to a traditional astrology. Like there's so much more to
Yeah.
it than that. And like, you
Mhm.
know, there are a lot of people who came to astrology from sun signs because their sun sign resonated for them. And like I don't want to yuck their yum for sure. But like,
Yeah.
having Stephen Forrest as my first real exposure to astrology, like bless him. Bless him. Because like I was in a vulnerable place when I found astrology, and I would have really liked to have been let off the hook. And if I had read somebody who told me what they thought that I wanted to hear based on my sun, moon, and rising sign or whatever, I I probably would have listened to that. But you
Mhm.
know, I just happened to fall into a branch of astrology that doesn't let you off the hook. Like I feel like uh Stephen's evolutionary astrology, like you think that you're being responsible and you think that you're being self-critical and you think that you're holding yourself on the hook, and it's like, "Oh, no, no, no. Like this is even more about free will than you realize. This is even more about your choices than you realize." I mean,
Yeah.
uh, Capricorn, bless him, but like with Aries rising, I think like
See
goodness, like
Forest?
it's all about climbing the mountain. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he's Aries rising with a Capricorn sun. Um and he seems like it too when you meet him in person.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, so like I I needed that or I would not have come to astrology at all, because when I found the inner sky, I was not just someone who didn't like astrology or didn't believe in astrology. Like I was a person who actively believed that astrology was dangerous. I believed that it fundamentally hurt people.
I think
And
it is dangerous.
oh yeah.
It can hurt people, absolutely. I don't think it's like a wrong um, impression to get from astrology at all, because it totally
I
can.
Oh yeah. And it's dangerous for all kinds of reasons. Like, it's dangerous because, you can dive into traditional astrology and you can start learning how to predict when people are going to die. It can be dangerous because you can hand over your free will to, your horoscope app that is accurate just enough that you can stop thinking.
Yeah.
But it's also dangerous because the way that I justified studying astrology in the beginning, because even after I discovered the inner sky, I was like, I can't actually believe in this. Like, I have a master's degree. I can't believe in this. Um, was, I was fascinated by the idea that very smart people had been fascinated by this and had believed in magic. I was
Hmm.
like, I'm a novelist. I'm going to write a novel about the final days of, smart people believing in magic.
Yeah.
And like 7 years later, my novel was like lost in the garage in a box somewhere, and I still didn't understand astrology.
Hmm.
And I feel like the fact that astrology is so big on social media is so bad for people, because people will be like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to learn astrology over my like 2-week vacation this summer." And then it's this morass that just sucks you in, and like next thing you know, you're like listening to 3-hour podcasts with Chris Brennan or whatever, and
Yeah.
like you don't know how big it is until you start to get into it. And like I actually had this like couple week period a couple months ago where I was grieving the fact that I am never going to master this discipline because it's just too freaking big.
Hmm.
Like I I just hit my 10-year anniversary of studying astrology recently, and I'm like, yeah, I don't feel like I know any more than when I first started. And like I can look down the hill and like I can talk to my students and realize how hard it is for me to not like talk over their heads. And so like I'm not stupid. Like I have come a long way in 10 years, but I look up the mountain and I'm like, I'm never going to reach the top of that. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter if I live to be 150. Like I'm not going to read all these books. I'm not going to be able to internalize every technique.
Well, yeah, God, would you want to? I don't know. I think.
I don't know. Like I think that that's what's lovely. It's what makes everybody unique, you know?
Hmm. Well, I guess I don't know. I guess I've gone back and forth and rubber banded like between extremes with astrology long enough to like figure out where middle is for me and more or less live there most of the almost all the time at this point. Um, I have my moments, I guess, and I think it's good. I don't know. Actually, I was thinking about this the other day because I not that long ago, it was a couple weeks ago, where I had this like I don't know. Does it ever happen to you where you like uh I don't know, just start questioning astrology, like
Oh yeah.
hard, where you're like, what am I
Oh yeah.
doing? Like, is this really, like, am I really, am I just convincing myself that this is real? Um, and I think it's actually an important thing to do. I think it actually make you a better
Oh yeah.
astrologer, better human. Personally, it's not a fun thing to
Hmm.
have to go through all the time, but
No.
that's true of like priests, or
Hmm.
almost all like religious figures of any kind. Not that I strictly look at astrology. It's hard to explain what astrology is exactly, but it does require a certain amount of faith. But that's what I love about astrology. Is
Mm,
it'll prove itself to you if you let it. Um,
yeah.
but it will stop at a certain point, like where it'll stop
Hmm.
proving. I don't know. You'll go on the chase looking for it to do more than it can actually do, and you will. It's like you lose your way, or I don't know. But I think those are important points to reach, maybe, because it does get you back to a more healthy human state. Because I feel like if you get too far with astrology and say it, even if it can do this, if it can absolutely predict the future, everything about a person, everything about their life, everything that they do, what time they take a shit on Wednesday, like all of that, what are you going to do with that information? And who are you going to be? Like what are you at that point? Like, are you this omniscient being,
Mm.
or like, are you like, I don't know, are you trying to get away from like being human, or are you trying to, um, I don't know. It's like, what are we trying to do at that point? I guess.
I mean, what are we trying to do with astrology at all? I mean, that's a question that's going to be unique for everybody.
I think
But
my answer
like,
is simple, but then I don't even know if it is sometimes.
really?
I
Well,
start
thank
to
you then.
wonder. Well, my answer is giving people meaning,
Hmm.
giving people context, or I don't know, because like the best part of astrology for me, I remember the moment really well of when it just sunk in and hit me like, whoa, like this is real. Like this is real. Like you're a moon in Sagittarius and like you have these qualities and like, wow, how is that fucking real? Like, how is that real? It blew my mind, but it was like the most magical feeling. It was just like, whoa, like Santa Claus is real or something like that. Uh,
Yes, Virginia, Jupiter is real.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's like how I don't know it, but then sometimes when I talk about it too, and I'll reflect on maybe what I talked about, I'll question if that's really my motivation with it, because that's not all I
Mm.
do with it. I don't know. I I guess in practice, I probably end up using it a lot for her helping people be seen, I guess, or it could be in part a lot of whatever it was that drove me to want to just figure people out to begin with. I don't know what that
Mhm.
is. If you lean hard into it, the astrology of it, maybe it's like, well, Scorpio moons, they want to feel secure. So, and they're always feeling worried. So they're probably going to want to feel like if they understand people around them, they will have this feeling, have a feeling of control. It's a psychological principle. Like when you feel like you understand the people around you, you can predict their behavior and you get the sense of control, that you can protect yourself from stuff. But it never really did that for me, astrology. And I don't know if it's like the motivation comes from that place, but like in practice, it's not really what I'm going for. But I don't know.
Mm.
There's mysteries, I guess, within myself. What exactly it is that motivates me.
I don't know, like, I can definitely see your interpretation of that Scorpio moon, and, like, I would be lying if I didn't say that the first thing that popped into my mind was that Scorpio moon, but I feel like the combination of your Scorpio moon and your Mars in Aquarius, it's like I can I can see you using it like an anthropologist. Like you're like the Jane Goodall, like sitting outside of the troop, looking at all of the other monkeys running around and taking notes and understanding them. And it's like astrology just happens to be the language that you're writing in your notebook. It's like a shorthand for psychology almost to me.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah. Well, that's
that's really what drew me to it.
well, and there's a big component I think of it too that is entirely, I guess you could say banal, maybe. But like as I started studying it, I picked it up quickly, and I got good at it, relatively good at it, pretty quickly. And
Mm,
it just clicked in my head really well. It was like a bunch of stuff in my brain that I didn't really have a use for, or didn't know what to do with, or find like an application for in the world. Suddenly there was an
yeah,
application for it. And it was like, wow, I feel like I found something that I fit into in some way. And that that feels good, right? Um, and that's maybe so
yeah.
much of why we do many things.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've talked on the podcast before about how you and I both have these really diverse academic backgrounds. Like, we couldn't decide what we were going to major in, and we had these things that we kind of orbited around, and we're trying to figure out how to put them all together in some kind of like interdisciplinary way. And like,
Hmm.
astrology does that. It's like, you can come to it from this super stoic fatalistic perspective, and you can find the astrologers who will back you up and who will provide you for a system for that. Or you
Hmm.
can be like super Jungian and believe that astrology is a tool for understanding synchronicity, and you'll have um Stephen Arroyo and Richard Tarnas will be happy to back you up. And
Yeah.
it's like we're coming back to this idea that we had a minute ago about how um, astrology is really capable of meeting you where you are, whether you're in a good place in your headspace or not.
Hmm. Yeah.
So we have like 3 minutes, and I'm going to ask you the cruelest question, which is, what do
Oh,
you think
bring it.
astrology is when it's at its best?
When it's at its best?
At its
Hmm.
best,
That's actually
best use of the tool.
it's a nice question, actually. I like that question. I like questions in general. So I feel like I'm gonna answer the question. Just wanted to You were saying something
Venus and
earlier
Gemini.
that
I mean, why
had
not?
me I know. That had me thinking about I feel like I don't know anything about astrology a lot of, like, sometimes. Or I'll just be like, "Wha do I even know what I'm talking about?" Until someone asks me a question. And then it's like the
Yeah.
flood of information comes in. I'm like, "Oh, there it is." It's like I need the question to sort of prod me into being to having access to whatever it is that's in the banks.
I
Um,
know exactly what you mean. I'm the exact same way.
mhm. That's why I can't just sit and talk to myself, very well, on camera. But to answer the question, when astrology is at its very best, I think it's best when it is comfortably sitting with the rest of your life in a way where, uh where it's a tool and it makes you feel more connected, maybe, to whatever it is that people go to religion for. I think there's a component to that. Whatever it is that we're seeking, that's a connection to something greater than ourselves. Astrology can do that, and it gives you that. Um, and maybe it helps you um, make decisions. It doesn't make them for you, but it helps you
Mm.
understand the context of what you're working with, maybe in a way that helps clarify the decision for you, kind of like tarot does, I think. Um,
Yeah.
and I think maybe this might be a little more personal, um, but because it makes everything else more interesting for me, and I think that's where it's at its best for me. Is it actually? It's not even almost the astrology; it's the fact that astrology becomes this medium for me to connect with other stuff.
Mhm.
People got more interesting, and I started to be more actively interested in what people were like and what they had to say. Because I went through a period when my progressed Venus went retrograde where I didn't care. I withdrew from people, which was a whole nother topic that we don't have time for.
Oh my goodness. 12 seconds. Venus retrograde. Go.
Yeah. Answer the question. 5 seconds. What's the best thing about what's astrology at its best for you?
Self-knowledge.
Too late.